The champagne glass shattered against David Thorne's boots before he even saw it coming. "Oops," Trent Baylor laughed, not bothering to hide his smirk. "Guess I'm a little clumsy today." David looked down at the crystal fragments scattered across the pristine marble floor of the Baylor mansion, then back up at his ex-wife's new husband. 30 guests had gone silent, all eyes fixed on them. Pink balloons, a carousel cake, and enough decorations to fund a small wedding, all for Emily's 7th birthday. "No problem," David said, his voice steady. "Accidents happen." But this wasn't an accident, and everyone in that room knew it. Natalie appeared beside Trent. "David, Emily will be happy you're coming." Her tone was polite enough for the crowd, cold enough to freeze hell. "Daddy!" Emily ran across the room, her pink dress flowing behind her, and crashed into David's legs. He scooped her up. "Happy birthday, princess," he whispered into her ear. "I got your present," she whispered back. "It's in my room. The necklace is so pretty." Natalie swooped in, lifting her daughter from David's arms. "Come on, sweetheart. Time for cake." The next hour passed in a blur of forced smiles and awkward small talk. David stood on the edges, watching his daughter navigate a party that felt more like a corporate event than a child's birthday. The other kids seemed afraid to get their clothes dirty. The parents talked about stock portfolios and vacation homes in Cabo. This wasn't Emily's world. This was Natalie and Trent's world, and they were trying to reshape his daughter to fit into it. When the last guest finally left, David was packing up Emily's gifts when she tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, we need to go. Something's wrong." Her voice was barely a whisper, but the fear in it made every muscle in David's body tense. Natalie was in the kitchen with the catering staff. Trent was on his phone by the window. "What do you mean, Em?" Emily looked around nervously, then leaned close to his ear. Her next words made David's cold. "I saw Uncle Sean in the basement. They heard him." David's mind raced. Sean Morrison, Natalie's younger brother, the one who'd been missing for a week. Natalie had told everyone he'd gone on some spiritual retreat in Costa Rica, trying to find himself after his latest business failure. "When did you see him, baby?" "Yesterday. I went downstairs to get my old toys, and there was this room I never saw before. Uncle Sean was tied to a chair, and Trent was hitting him." David felt his hands shake. He forced them steady. "Did they see you?" "No. I hid behind the boxes. But Daddy, Uncle Sean looked really sick." "And there were other people down there too. They looked really scared." "Other people?" Emily nodded. "In a big room with beds. They all looked sleepy, but the scary kind of sleepy. Like they couldn't wake up even if they wanted to." David's military training kicked in. Assess, adapt, act. But his daughter was standing in front of him, and his ex-wife was 20 feet away. And nothing about the situation was covered in any manual he'd ever read. "Emily, I need you to listen to me very carefully. We're going to leave now, okay? Tell Mommy you want to come to my house for a sleepover." "But it's not my weekend with you." "I know. But this is important. Can you do that for me?" Emily nodded, her small face serious beyond her years. The conversation with Natalie went exactly as David expected. "Absolutely not." Natalie crossed her arms, her designer dress wrinkled from the long day. "It's Sunday night. She has school tomorrow. She needs to stick to her routine." "One night won't hurt anything," David said, keeping his voice level. "I want to go with Daddy." Emily's small voice cut through the argument. She'd changed out of her party dress into jeans and a t-shirt, her overnight bag already packed. Natalie's face softened when she looked at her daughter, but her voice remained firm. "Sweetheart, you'll see Daddy next weekend. Tonight you need to be here." "Please, Mommy, just tonight." Trent appeared in the doorway, still on his phone. He covered the mouthpiece with his hand. "What's the problem?" "No problem," David said quickly. "Emily just wanted to spend the night at my place." Trent's eyes narrowed. "Why?" The question hung in the air like smoke. David felt Emily tense beside him. "Because she's 7 years old and wants to spend time with her father," David said. "She spends plenty of time with you, every other weekend, just like the court ordered." "Trent, this doesn't concern you." "Actually, it does. I help raise her. And I think it's important that Emily learns to respect boundaries." David took a step forward. Trent didn't back down. "The only boundary that matters here is between you and my daughter," David said, his voice dropping into dangerous territory. "You want to cross that line? Guys, please!" Natalie stepped between them. Emily, go upstairs and get ready for bed. Daddy will see you next weekend. Emily looked up at David, her eyes pleading. In that moment, he saw everything, her fear, her confusion, her desperate need for someone to protect her, and he made a decision that would change everything. Actually, I think Emily should come with me tonight. David, she told me some things that concern me about what she's seen in this house. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Natalie went pale. Trent ended his phone call. What kind of things? Trent's voice was careful, controlled. The kind of things that make me think Emily needs to be somewhere safe while I figure out what's going on. Are you threatening us? Natalie's voice had gone shrill. I'm protecting my daughter. From what? David looked down at Emily, then back at his ex-wife. From whatever happened to Sean. The silence that followed felt like a loaded piece. Trent's jaw twitched. Natalie's hands trembled. Sean's in Costa Rica, Natalie said finally. Is he? Of course he is. I told you. Emily, go wait by the car. David handed her his keys. Lock the doors. David, what the hell? Go. Now. Emily took the keys and ran. David waited until he heard the front door close before turning back to Natalie and Trent. I don't know what you two are involved in, and frankly, I don't care. But if my daughter is in danger because of your choices, that becomes my problem. She's not in danger, Natalie said. You're being paranoid. Then you won't mind if she stays with me until I can sort this out. Actually, I would mind. Trent stepped forward. Emily belongs here, with her mother, with her family. I'm her family. You're her weekend father. There's a difference. David felt something snap inside his chest. Years of biting his tongue, of being the reasonable one, of watching his ex-wife choose money and status over their daughter's well-being. It all came flooding back. You want to test that theory? David, don't! Natalie's voice was pleading now. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder than what needs to be, Nat? What exactly are you talking about? But she couldn't answer, because whatever was happening in this house, whatever Emily had seen, Natalie was in it up to her neck. I'm taking Emily home, David said. If you want to call your lawyer, go ahead. But she's not sleeping under this roof tonight. You can't just watch me. David turned toward the door, but Trent's hand landed on his shoulder. I don't think so. David looked down at the hand, then back up at Trent. His voice was deadly quiet. You got 3 seconds to move your hand before I move it for you. You threatening me, Thorne? I don't make threats. For a moment, they stood frozen. Two men who'd never liked each other, finally facing off with everything on the table. Then Trent's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and whatever he saw there made him step back. This isn't over, he said. No, David agreed. It's not. David walked out of that house knowing his life had just changed forever. Emily was waiting in his truck, buckled into her booster seat, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. What's that, Em? I took it from the basement, from Uncle Sean's room. She handed him the paper with shaking hands. David unfolded it under the dome light. Written in barely legible handwriting were the words, Marina drop Tuas, burner, #0029. Emily, this is very important. Did anyone see you take this? I don't think so. I was really careful. David started the truck, his mind already racing. Whatever Natalie and Trent were involved in, it was bigger than a missing brother. It was organized. It was planned. And Emily had just handed him the first real clue. As they drove through the quiet streets of Pine Hollow, Emily fell asleep in the back seat. David watched her in the rearview mirror, this small person who trusted him completely and made a silent promise. Whatever it took, however far he had to go, he would keep her safe, even if it meant going to war with the mother she loved, especially if it meant that. David waited until Emily was asleep in her old bedroom before making the call. Luis Martinez answered on the second ring, even though it was past midnight on the East Coast. Thorne? Jesus, man, what time is it out there? Luis, I need a favor, the kind that might get complicated. A pause. Luis had been David's communications specialist in Afghanistan, back when complicated meant the difference between making it home and making it into a body bag. Talk to me. David told him everything. The birthday party, Emily's revelation, the note, the fear in his daughter's eyes. Luis listened without interrupting, the way he always had during briefings. Send me the number, Luis said when David finished. Give me 6 hours. I need more than just the number, Luis. I need to know what these people are doing. Copy that. And David, watch your back. People who disappear family members don't usually stop at one. David ended the call and walked to his living room window. His neighborhood was quiet, modest, nothing like the Baylor mansion. But it was real. No performance, no pretense. Just a place where a father could raise his daughter without worrying about which fork to use at dinner. His phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Tomorrow. Just us." N. David stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. The next morning, Emily was unusually quiet over breakfast. She picked at her pancakes, occasionally glancing toward the windows like she expected someone to be watching. "You okay, princess?" "Are we in trouble, Daddy?" David set down his coffee cup. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind where bad things happen to people who see things they're not supposed to see." The words hit David like a physical blow. His 7-year-old daughter was talking like a witness in a protection program. "Emily, look at me." He knelt beside her chair. "Nothing bad is going to happen to you, I promise. But what about Uncle Sean? What if they do the same thing to us?" "They won't." "Because I won't let them." Emily studied his face with those dark, intelligent eyes. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but Daddy, I don't want to go back there. Not ever." "You don't have to do anything you don't want to do." But even as he said it, David knew it wasn't that simple. Natalie was Emily's mother. The courts wouldn't just take his word that something was wrong. He needed proof. Louise called back at 10 a.m. with shocking information. The burner number traces back to a shell company called Maritime Holdings. But here's where it gets interesting. Maritime Holdings is owned by GenDepth Labs, Trent's company. Yeah, and GenDepth Labs has some interesting contracts with the federal government. Biomedical research, drug testing, that kind of thing, all above board, at least on paper. What about off paper? That's where things get murky. I did some digging through their employee records, financial statements, communication patterns. They've got multiple facilities, including a research site about 20 miles north of you, a place called Clearwater Marina. David felt the pieces clicking together. Marina drop. Exactly. But David, there's more. I ran the number through some databases I still have access to. That burner phone has been used to coordinate at least a dozen different transfers over the past 6 months. Transfers of what? People. Always at night, always to boats registered under different names, but all linked back to the same parent company. And here's the thing, none of these people ever come back. David closed his eyes. Emily's words echoed in his head. They all looked really scared. Luis, I need you to dig deeper. Financial records, employee communications, anything that can tell me what they're really doing. Already on it. But David, this isn't some small-time operation. Whatever your ex-wife got herself into, it's big, professional, the kind of thing that makes people disappear permanently. After ending the call, David made a decision that would either save his daughter or destroy what was left of his relationship with her mother. He called his lawyer. Cynthia Rowe had been handling David's divorce and custody case for 3 years. She was tough, smart, and had a reputation for fighting dirty when her clients' children were at stake. "David, what can I do for you?" "I need to file for emergency custody modification." "On what grounds?" David told her everything. When he finished, there was a long silence. "You realize how this sounds, right? Ex-husband claims current husband is running some kind of illegal operation based on the testimony of a 7-year-old and a phone number?" "I know how it sounds, but Cynthia, my daughter is scared, really scared, and her uncle is missing." "Have you filed a missing person report?" "His sister says he's on vacation." "Then legally, he's not missing." David rubbed his temples. "What do I need to make this work?" "Evidence. Real evidence. Photos, documents, witnesses, something more than a child's word and a phone number. And if I get that evidence, then we go to war." That afternoon, David drove Emily to school and then headed north toward Clearwater Marina. The facility was larger than he'd expected. Multiple buildings, a large dock, several boats of various sizes. The whole place was surrounded by a high fence topped with razor wire. He parked at a diner across the street and watched through binoculars. For 2 hours, nothing happened. Then, just as he was about to leave, a white van pulled up to the main gate. David focused the binoculars and felt his heart stop. Trent Baylor was driving. The van disappeared into the compound. 20 minutes later, it emerged again, this time heading back toward town. David followed at a distance, his hands gripping the steering wheel. The van stopped at a small office building on the outskirts of Pine Hollow. David watched Trent go inside, then come out 15 minutes later with a manila envelope. Their eyes met across the parking lot for just a moment, long enough for David to see the recognition, the anger, and something else. Fear. That evening, Emily was unusually quiet during dinner. She pushed her food around her plate and kept glancing at her phone. Expecting a call? David asked. Mommy texted me. She wants me to come home tonight. What did you tell her? That I want to stay here. Emily looked up at him. But she said if I don't come home, she'll have to call the police. David felt his jaw clench. She said that. She said you're not allowed to keep me when it's not your weekend, and the good daughters listen to their mothers. The manipulation made David sick. Using Emily's love for her mother as a weapon. What do you want to do, Em? I want to stay here. But I don't want Mommy to be mad at me. Your mom loves you, sweetheart. She's just confused right now. About Uncle Sean? About a lot of things. Emily was quiet for a moment. Then, Daddy, what if Uncle Sean is dead? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. David wanted to reassure her, to tell her everything would be okay. But Emily was too smart for comfortable lies. I don't know, Princess, but I'm going to find out. And if he is dead? What happens to the people who did it? David looked at his daughter, this small, fierce, innocent person who was being forced to ask questions no child should have to ask. Then they pay for it. The next morning brought a knock at David's door that changed everything. The sheriff's deputy was young, polite, and apologetic. Mr. Thorne, I have a court order here, requiring you to return Emily Thorne to her mother immediately. David read the document twice. Emergency custody modification based on parental kidnapping and interference with existing custody arrangements. Can I call my lawyer? Of course, sir, but the order is effective immediately. David's hands shook as he dialed Cynthia's number. She answered on the first ring. They move fast, she said after David explained the situation. Too fast. This kind of emergency order usually takes days to process, not hours. What does that mean? It means they've got connections. Probably paid for them. So what do I do? You comply, for now. But David, this proves you're onto something. People don't pull strings like this unless they're protecting something big. David found Emily in her room, packing her clothes with mechanical precision. Her face was blank, but he could see the fear in her eyes. I have to go back, don't I? For now. But Em, I need you to promise me something. If anything happens, anything that scares you or seems wrong, you call me immediately. Don't worry about getting in trouble. Don't worry about anything except calling me. Emily nodded. Will you still try to help Uncle Sean? Yes, even if it makes Mommy mad? Especially then. As David drove Emily back to the Baylor mansion, she reached into her backpack and pulled out a small device. What's that? It's a voice recorder. From school for when we do presentations. She showed him how to operate it. I thought, if I see Uncle Sean again, or if they say something about him, maybe I could record it. David stared at his daughter in amazement. 7 years old, and she was thinking like an investigator. That's very smart, Em, but it's also dangerous. If they catch you, they won't catch me. I'm good at being invisible. The casual way she said it broke David's heart. No child should have to be good at being invisible. Okay, but you only use it if it's completely safe. And if anything feels wrong, you get out of there and call me. I will. When they pulled up to the Baylor house, Natalie was waiting on the front steps. She hugged Emily tightly, then fixed David with a stare that could freeze lava. This isn't over, she said quietly. No, David agreed. It's not. That night, David's phone rang at 2 a.m. Emily's voice was barely a whisper. Daddy, they're moving Uncle Sean tonight. I can hear them talking downstairs. Where are you? In my room. But Daddy, there are other people here too. I think they're the people from the basement. David was already reaching for his clothes. Emily, I need you to stay in your room and lock the door. Don't come out no matter what you hear. But what if, no matter what, promise me. I promise. I'm coming to get you. Daddy, wait. I got something on the recorder. Trent was talking to someone on the phone. He said they need to clean house and that Uncle Sean was becoming a liability. David froze. Emily, delete that recording right now. What? Why? Because if they find it, you're in danger. Delete it and get somewhere safe. But it's evidence that could get you hurt. Delete it now. A long pause. Then, okay, it's gone. Good girl. Now lock your door and don't open it for anyone except me. David drove through the empty streets of Pine Hollow like a man possessed. When he reached the Baylor house, he parked down the street and approached on foot. The house was dark except for lights in the basement. David crept around to the side yard where he could see down through a window well into what looked like a medical facility. Sean Morrison was strapped to a gurney, unconscious but breathing. Two other people, a man and a woman, were similarly restrained. Trent was there, along with two other men David didn't recognize. One of the strangers was preparing a syringe. David pulled out his phone and started recording, his hands shaking with rage. Whatever they were doing to Sean, whatever they'd done to those other people, it was about to get worse. The man with the syringe approached Sean. David couldn't hear what the euthanasia they were saying, but he could see Trent nodding, pointing toward the stairs. They were getting ready to move him. David had two choices: call the police and hope they arrived in time, or take action himself. The first option meant risking Emily's safety. The second meant risking everything. He chose his daughter. David circled back to his truck and waited. 20 minutes later, the white van emerged from the garage. David followed at a distance, his phone recording everything. The van headed north toward Clearwater Marina. David's phone buzzed. Text from Emily. They're gone, all of them. House is empty, except for me and the cleaning lady. Stay locked in your room, he texted back. I'll be there soon. The marina was dark except for a single light at the end of the main dock. David parked a quarter-mile away and approached on foot, staying in the shadows. The van was parked near a large boat. David could see three figures moving around the deck, Trent and the two other men. They were loading something onto the boat. Someone. David crept closer, using the dock pilings as cover. Through his phone camera, he could see them lifting Sean's unconscious form. But Sean wasn't the only one. There were two other people, both unconscious, both being loaded like cargo. David heard Trent's voice carry across the water. Make sure they're weighted properly this time. Can't have another one washing up. Another one. David's hands shook as he recorded, understanding finally hitting him like a physical blow. These people weren't running medical experiments. They were disposing of failed test subjects, and Emily had seen it all. The boat's engine rumbled to life. David watched them head out into the dark water, carrying their human cargo toward whatever fate awaited them. He had his evidence. Now he had to figure out how to use it without getting his daughter eliminated. David drove back to the Baylor house with his phone full of video evidence and his mind full of rage. Emily was waiting by the front door when he arrived, her overnight bag packed. I heard them talking, she said as they drove away. Trent said they had to accelerate the timeline because someone was asking too many questions. Did they say who? You, Daddy. They know you're watching them. David felt a chill run down his spine. If they knew he was investigating, Emily was in more danger than ever. Pack everything you need, Princess. We might be staying at my house for a while. How long is a while? David looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror, this brave, intelligent little girl who'd been thrust into an adult nightmare, until the bad guys are gone. As they drove through the quiet streets of Pine Hollow, David's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown number. Don't answer it, Emily said quietly. Why? Because when people call this late, it's never good news. David let the call go to voicemail, but the message, when he played it later, confirmed his worst fears. Trent's voice, cold and controlled. We know what you think you saw tonight, Thorne, but you didn't see anything. And if you keep digging, your daughter might end up seeing a lot less. Permanently. The war had officially begun. David spent the next morning converting his home into a fortress. New locks, security cameras, motion sensors. Luis had shipped him equipment overnight, the kind of surveillance gear that wasn't available at the local electronics store. Daddy, are we prisoners now? Emily asked, watching him install the third deadbolt on the front door. We're being careful. There's a difference? Sometimes David forgot how perceptive his daughter was. Yeah, Em, there's a difference. Prisoners can't leave. We just don't want uninvited visitors. Cynthia Rowe arrived at noon with news that made David's blood pressure spike. Natalie filed for emergency custody modification. Claims you're having a mental health crisis and that Emily is in danger. What kind of danger? According to her petition, you've become paranoid and delusional. She's claiming you broke into their property last night and have been stalking her husband. David laughed, but there was no humor in it. She's good. I'll give her that. David, they have security footage of you on their property. And there are witnesses who saw you following Trent's van. I was investigating. I know what you were doing. But from a legal standpoint, it looks like harassment. Worse, it looks like the behavior of someone who's lost touch with reality. Emily looked up from her homework. But he was helping Uncle Sean. Cynthia's expression softened when she looked at Emily, but her voice remained professional. Sweetheart, the court needs proof that Uncle Sean needs help. Right now, all we have is complicated evidence. What does that mean? Emily asked. David answered for Cynthia. It means the video I took isn't enough by itself. We need more. What kind of more? Cynthia glanced at David, then back at Emily. We need to prove that your uncle is in danger and that your mother knew about it. Emily was quiet for a long moment. Then, what if I could prove that? We talked about this. It's too dangerous. But what if I could do it safely? David knelt beside his daughter's chair. What are you thinking? Mommy wants me to come home tonight. She called the school and everything, but what if I wore a wire? Like in the movies? Cynthia shook her head. Absolutely not. Using a child as an undercover operative is what? Emily interrupted. Wrong? More wrong than letting them hurt more people? The adults fell silent. In the mouth of a 7-year-old, the question carried devastating weight. Emily, David said carefully, what you're suggesting is very dangerous. So is doing nothing. Cynthia looked between father and daughter, then sighed. Even if we wanted to consider this, which I'm not saying we should, any evidence obtained through illegal surveillance would be inadmissible in court. But it would tell us what we're dealing with, David said, and maybe give us enough information to get the police involved. The police won't move without substantial evidence of a crime, and child endangerment accusations could backfire spectacularly if we're wrong. Emily stood up, her small face set with determination. I'm not wrong. I saw Uncle Sean. I saw those other people. And I heard Trent talking about making people disappear. David felt something shift inside his chest, pride mixed with terror. His daughter was brave enough to face down monsters, but she was still just a child. There might be another way, he said slowly. 2 hours later, David was sitting in his truck outside the offices of KOSC News, the local television station. Investigative reporter Janet Kim had won awards for exposing corruption in nearby Portland. More importantly, she had no connections to the Baylor family or Gen Depth Labs. Mr. Thorne, I appreciate you coming forward, but what you're describing sounds like the plot of a thriller novel. David had shown her the videos, the phone records, everything except Emily's testimony. I know how it sounds, but I have evidence. Evidence of a boat leaving a marina at night. Evidence of your brother-in-law at a medical facility. That's not the same as evidence of the crimes you're suggesting. What would convince you? Janet Kim leaned back in her chair. Documentation, financial records showing illegal payments, communication records proving conspiracy, witness testimony from someone other than your 7-year-old daughter. And if I get that, then you'll have a story. David left the news station with a new plan forming in his mind. If the legal system wouldn't act without proof, and the media wouldn't report without evidence, then he'd have to get both. That afternoon, Emily came home from school with news that made David's skin crawl. Mommy picked me up today instead of the bus. She what? She was waiting in the parking lot. She said she wanted to talk to me about coming home. David felt panic rising in his throat. What did you tell her? That I wanted to stay with you. But Daddy, she looked really scared and sad, like she wanted to tell me something but couldn't. Did she say anything about Trent or Uncle Sean? Emily nodded. She said Uncle Sean called and that he's okay. But Daddy, she was lying. I could tell. How could you tell? She does this thing with her hands when she lies. She rubs her wedding ring, and she was doing it the whole time. David marveled again at his daughter's perception, but it also terrified him. If Emily could see through Natalie's lies so easily, what else had she figured out? That evening, Natalie called David directly. I want to see Emily tonight. It's not your night, Natty. I don't care about the schedule. I need to see my daughter. There was something in her voice, desperation mixed with fear. David found himself wondering if Natalie was as trapped as Emily. You can see her. Here, with me present. That's not... Those are the terms. Take them or leave them. A long pause. Then, fine. I'll be there in an hour. Natalie arrived alone, which surprised David. She looked exhausted, older than her 39 years. Her designer clothes couldn't hide the fact that she'd been crying. Emily ran to her mother, and for a moment, watching them embrace, David remembered why he'd fallen in love with Natalie in the first place. Before the money, before the status obsession, before Trent Baylor, she'd been a good mother, Can we talk privately? Natalie asked David. Why don't you go practice piano for a few minutes? When Emily was gone, Natalie collapsed onto David's couch like her strings had been cut. I'm in trouble, David. Real trouble. What kind of trouble? The kind where people get hurt if they try to leave. David sat across from her, close enough to see the fear in her eyes. Tell me. I can't. If Trent finds out I'm here, if he thinks I said anything, he's not here, Nat. It's just us. Natalie looked around David's modest living room like she was seeing it for the first time. Do you remember when we lived in that apartment in Portland before Emily was born? Of course. We were happy then, poor but happy. Why did I think we needed more than that? Because you're human. Because everyone wants security for their children. But this isn't security. Natalie's voice broke. This is a prison with better furniture. David leaned forward. Then leave it. I can't. Why not? Because I know too much. And people who know too much about Trent's business don't just walk away. What business, Natalie? What is he really doing? For a moment, David thought she might actually tell him. Her mouth opened, and he could see her wrestling with the decision. Then Emily's piano practice stopped, and they could hear small footsteps in the hallway. Natalie's face closed off. When she spoke again, her voice was controlled, distant. I need Emily to come home tomorrow. This has gone on long enough. She's safer here. She's safer with her mother. Is she? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like her mother is married to someone who makes people disappear. Natalie stood up abruptly. You don't know what you're talking about. Then explain it to me. I can't. Won't. Can't. The word exploded out of her. You think this is a choice, David? You think I have options here? Emily appeared in the doorway, drawn by her mother's raised voice. Mommy, are you okay? Natalie's expression melted. She went to Emily and hugged her tightly. I'm fine, baby. Mommy's just tired. You can stay here tonight, Emily said. Daddy won't mind. Natalie looked at David over Emily's head. For a moment, he saw the woman he'd once loved, scared, trapped, desperate for a way out. I can't, sweetheart. I have to go home. But you don't want to. The simple observation from a 7-year-old hung in the air like an accusation. Sometimes adults have to do things they don't want to do. Like lying? Natalie pulled back to look at Emily. What do you mean? You said Uncle Sean called, but he didn't, did he? David watched his ex-wife's face crumble. Whatever was left of her composure shattered under their daughter's innocent question. Emily, there are things you don't understand. I understand that Uncle Sean is hurt, and you're pretending he's not. Baby, I understand that Trent is a bad man, and you're scared of him. Emily, stop. I understand that you want to protect me, but you don't know how because you can't even protect yourself. The words hit Natalie like physical blows. She sank to her knees in front of Emily, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Emily hugged her mother. It's okay, Mommy. Daddy will fix it. David felt the weight of that faith like a physical thing. His daughter believed he could fix this nightmare. The problem was, he was starting to believe it too. After Natalie left, David tucked Emily into bed and sat on the edge of her mattress. I need to ask you something important. Okay. If I could find a way to help Mommy get away from Trent, would you want that? Emily thought for a moment. Would she be safe? Yes. Would Uncle Sean be safe? I hope so. Would we be safe? David hesitated. I don't know yet. Emily nodded solemnly. Then yes, I want that. It might mean that things get scary for a while. People might say bad things about me, about us. The police might get involved. Mommy might have to go somewhere safe until it's all over. But then we could be a family again? The question broke David's heart. We'll always be a family, Em, but it might be different than before. Different how? I don't know yet, but I promise you this. Whatever happens, I will always protect you, even if it means I have to do things that make me look like the bad guy. Emily studied his face in the dim light from the hallway. Daddy, are you going to do something dangerous? I'm going to do whatever it takes to keep you safe. That's not the same thing. No, David admitted, it's not. Emily was quiet for a long moment. Then, if you have to do something dangerous, will you promise to come back? I promise to try. Promise to succeed. David looked at his daughter. this fierce, intelligent, brave little person who'd already seen too much of the world's darkness. I promised to succeed. The next morning, David woke up with a plan that would either save his family or destroy what was left of his life. Either way, the waiting was over. It was time to fight back. David spent the morning preparing. He called his supervisor at the logistics company and requested extended leave. He withdrew cash from 3 different ATMs. He bought a burner phone and 2 more security cameras. Most importantly, he called Luis. I need everything you can get me on GenDepth Labs. Financial records, employee communications, research protocols, anything that shows what they're really doing. David, that kind of access could land me in federal prison. And what they're doing could land my daughter in a grave. A long pause. Give me 48 hours. I might not have 48 hours. Then give me 24 and pray it's enough. That afternoon, Emily came home from school with a message that changed everything. Mommy wants to meet you tonight. Alone? Where? At that coffee shop downtown, the one with the good muffins. David felt every muscle in his body tense. Did she say why? She said she has something to show you. Something about Uncle Sean. Did anyone else hear this conversation? Just me and Mommy. She picked me up again today, but this time she made sure nobody was watching. David knelt down to Emily's level. I want you to stay with Mrs. Patterson tonight. Mrs. Patterson was their elderly neighbor, a retired teacher who'd been keeping an eye on Emily when David had to work late. But what if something happens? Nothing's going to happen, but if it does, Mrs. Patterson has my number, Cynthia's number, and the police department on speed dial. Daddy, what if it's a trap? The question stopped David cold. His 7-year-old daughter was thinking like a tactical operative. Then I'll be ready for it. The coffee shop was nearly empty when David arrived at 8 p.m. Natalie was already there, sitting in a corner booth with her back to the wall. She looked exhausted, frightened, but determined. Thank you for coming, she said as David sat down. What do you have? Natalie reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. Copies of documents from Trent's safe. Financial records, research protocols, communication logs. David opened the envelope. The papers detailed a program called Human Sustainability Research. Medical experiments conducted on homeless people, undocumented immigrants, anyone who wouldn't be missed. Jesus, Natalie. How long has this been going on? 2 years, maybe longer. I didn't know at first. Trent told me it was legitimate research, that they were developing treatments for addiction and mental illness. When did you find out the truth? 6 months ago, I walked in on a conversation between Trent and his business partner. They were talking about disposal protocols and acceptable loss rates. David flipped through more pages. Names, dates, test results. People reduced to data points. Why didn't you go to the police? Because half the police department is on GenDepth's payroll, and because Trent told me what would happen if I ever betrayed him. What would happen? Natalie's voice dropped to a whisper. He showed me video of what they did to someone who tried to expose them. A researcher named Patricia Webb. They made it look like suicide, but it wasn't. No, and Trent made it very clear that anyone who crossed him would end up the same way, including Emily. David felt rage building in his chest like a physical pressure. He threatened our daughter? Not directly, but the implication was clear. Keep quiet, play the perfect wife, or lose everything that matters. So why are you here now? Why are you giving me this? Natalie looked out the window at the dark street. Because Sean figured it out. He was asking questions, making noise. And yesterday, Trent told me that the Sean problem had been permanently resolved. Meaning? Meaning, my brother is dead, David. And if Emily keeps talking about what she saw, she'll be next. The words hit David like a sledgehammer. We have to get her out of here. We have to get all of us out of here. But first, we have to make sure Trent can't hurt anyone else. David studied his ex-wife's face. What are you proposing? I'm proposing we destroy him, completely. Take down his operation, expose his crimes, make sure he spends the rest of his life in prison. And how do we do that? Natalie leaned forward. You have video of them moving bodies. I have financial records and research documents. But we need more. We need evidence that directly links Trent to the deaths. What kind of evidence? The kind that's in his personal computer, the kind he keeps in his home office. David saw where this was going. You want me to break into your house? I want us to break into my house tomorrow night. There's a charity gala at the country club. Trent will be there until at least midnight, schmoozing donors and city council members. What about security? I'll disable the alarm. I know all the codes. And if we get caught, then we're dead anyway. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the decision hanging between them. There's something else, Natalie said. Something you need to know about Emily? David's blood went cold. What about Emily? Trent's been watching her, having her followed. He knows she saw Sean, and he knows she's been talking to you about it. How do you know this? Because he told me. He wanted me to know what would happen if I didn't bring her home. What would happen? An accident. Something that would look natural. Kids fall downstairs, get hit by cars, drown in swimming pools. Tragic things happen to children every day. David felt something snap inside his chest. The careful control he'd maintained, the reasonable approach he'd tried to take, all of it evaporated in an instant. He threatened to eliminate my daughter. David, he threatened to eliminate my daughter. I know. That's why we have to stop him. David looked at the documents spread across the table. Names, dates, evidence of unspeakable crimes. And somewhere in the middle of it all, his ex-wife had found the courage to fight back. When do we do this? Tomorrow night. But David, if we're going to do this, we have to be smart about it. We get in, get the evidence, and get out. No confrontations, no heroics. And after we get the evidence, we turn it over to the FBI, all of it, and we pray it's enough to put Trent away forever. David gathered up the documents. What about Emily? She can't be anywhere near this. I'll arrange for her to spend the night with a friend, somewhere Trent can't find her. No, she stays with me until this is over. David, if something goes wrong, then she needs to be with someone who will die before letting anything happen to her. Natalie's eyes filled with tears. I never wanted this for her. I never wanted any of this. I know. I thought I was giving her a better life. Stability, security, opportunities we couldn't afford on our own. You were trying to be a good mother. I was trying to be a rich mother. There's a difference. David reached across the table and squeezed Natalie's hand. We're going to fix this. What if we can't? Then we'll die trying. Natalie squeezed back. Promise me something, David. If this goes wrong, if something happens to me, promise me you'll take Emily and disappear. Change your names, move somewhere far away, whatever it takes to keep her safe. Nothing's going to happen to you. Promise me. David looked into the eyes of the woman he'd once loved, the mother of his child, and made a promise he hoped he'd never have to keep. I promise. As they left the coffee shop, David's phone buzzed with a text from Luis. Got what you need. You're not going to believe this. The war was about to begin in earnest, and David was finally ready to fight it. David spent the next 24 hours preparing for a mission that would either expose the truth or get them all terminated. Luis had delivered files that painted a picture so horrific that David had to step outside twice just to process what he was reading. GenDepth Labs wasn't just conducting illegal medical experiments. They were running a full-scale human trafficking operation, using homeless people and undocumented immigrants as test subjects for experimental drugs. The death rate was over 60%. The survivors were left with permanent brain damage or shipped overseas to facilities in countries with no extradition treaties. Sean Morrison had stumbled onto the operation while doing accounting work for one of GenDepth's shell companies. Instead of staying quiet, he'd started asking questions. Bad move. Daddy, you look really angry, Emily said over breakfast. I'm not angry at you, princess. But you're angry at someone. David set down his coffee cup. Sometimes adults have to get angry to protect the people they love. Are you protecting me? Every day. Are you protecting Mommy? The question hit harder than David expected. I'm trying to... Emily studied his face with those dark, intelligent eyes. Is Uncle Sean really dead? David had been dreading this question. His daughter deserved the truth, but the truth was going to hurt. I think so, Em. Emily nodded slowly. I thought so too. When I saw him in the basement, he looked different, like part of him was already gone. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. Emily's voice was steady, mature beyond her years. But Daddy, when you stop the bad guys, will you make sure they can't hurt anyone else ever again? That's the plan. Good. That afternoon, while Emily was at school, David met with Cynthia Rowe to finalize their legal strategy. If we can get the evidence from Trent's computer, we'll have enough for federal charges. Cynthia said. Racketeering, conspiracy, felony assault, possibly more depending on what else we find. What about Emily's custody? With this kind of evidence, Natalie's cooperation, and Trent facing life in prison, you'll get full custody, no question. And if something goes wrong tonight? Cynthia's expression darkened. Then Emily becomes an orphan, and I become a witness in a federal investigation. That's not going to happen. David, what you're planning is incredibly dangerous. These people have been operating for years without getting caught. They have money, connections, resources. If they figure out what you're doing, then I'll deal with it. How? David met her eyes. However I have to. That evening, David dropped Emily off at Mrs. Patterson's house with instructions that made the elderly woman's eyes widen. If anyone comes here asking for Emily, anyone except me or Natalie, 911. Don't answer the door. Don't try to negotiate. Just call the police. David, what's going on? Something I should have dealt with a long time ago. Emily hugged him tight before he left. Be careful, Daddy. Always am, Princess. No, you're not. You're brave. There's a difference. Sometimes David forgot how smart his daughter was. You're right. I'll be brave and careful. Promise? Promise. At 11 p.m., David met Natalie 2 blocks from the Baylor mansion. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past week. Trent left for the gala an hour ago, she said. The house is empty except for the cleaning service, and they'll be gone by midnight. Security system? Disabled? I told Trent I was having trouble with the motion sensors in Emily's room. They drove separately to the house, parking on different streets. David approached through the backyard, using shadows and landscaping to stay hidden. Natalie let him in through the kitchen door. The house felt different at night, larger, more ominous. David had never liked the place, but now it felt actively malevolent. His office is upstairs, Natalie whispered. 3rd door on the left. They crept through the house like burglars, which David supposed they were. Trent's office was a monument to ego awards, photos with politicians, certificates from various medical organizations, all of it meaningless now. The computer was password protected, but Louise had prepared for that. David plugged in a USB drive that would bypass the security and copy the entire hard drive. How long will this take? Natalie asked. 20 minutes, maybe 30. We don't have 30 minutes. The cleaning crew leaves at midnight, and Trent sometimes comes home early. As if summoned by her words, they heard the front door open. David and Natalie froze. Heavy footsteps echoed through the downstairs hallway. Trent's voice carried up the stairs. Told you to have it ready by tonight. I don't care what the test results show. He was on the phone, and he wasn't alone. David could hear at least 2 other voices. Is there another way out? David whispered. Natalie shook her head. The office window overlooks the front yard. They'd see us. The footsteps were coming upstairs. David pulled the USB drive from the computer. It was only half finished, but it would have to be enough. Closet, Natalie whispered. They squeezed into Trent's walk-in closet just as the office door opened. Through the slats in the closet door, David could see Trent enter with 2 other men. One he recognized from the marina, the other a stranger in an expensive suit. The Morrison problem is handled, Trent was saying. But we've got a new issue. The ex-husband is asking questions. What kind of questions? The stranger's voice was cold, professional. The kind that could bring federal attention. He's been following our operations, recording video, making copies of documents. How much does he know? Too much. And his daughter saw the Morrison transfer. She's been talking. David felt Natalie's hand grip his arm. In the darkness of the closet, he could feel her terror. Children can be unpredictable, the stranger said. Perhaps it's time to eliminate the entire family unit. That might draw more attention than it prevents, Trent replied. A man, his ex-wife, and their child all dying in the same week? Even the local police might notice. Then what do you suggest? We handle the father first, make it look like suicide. Distraught over custody battle, history of military service, recent erratic behavior. Then we wait a few weeks before dealing with the others. David's vision went red. These men were discussing the execution of his family like it was a business transaction. What about the wife? The stranger asked. Natalie's been useful, but she's becoming a liability. She knows too much, and she's getting emotional about her brother. Emotional how? She's been asking questions, wanting to see the body, planning a funeral. I told her he was cremated overseas, but she's not buying it. David felt Natalie's breathing quicken. Her brother was dead, and her husband was discussing it like a minor inconvenience. Timeline? The stranger asked. This week. Tomorrow night at the latest. The father has been making threats, acting unstable. His ex-wife calls the police, concerned for Emily's safety. He shows up drunk, there's a confrontation, he turns a piece on himself. Tragic, but understandable. And you'll handle the staging? My people will. They're professionals. David had heard enough. These men were planning to eliminate his family, and they were going to make it look like he'd done it himself. Worse, they were going to use Emily's safety as the justification. He started to move, but Natalie's grip on his arm tightened. She was right. They were outnumbered, and any confrontation would end badly. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, covering details that made David's stomach churn. Times, locations, methods. These people had eliminated families before. Finally, the men left. David and Natalie waited in the closet for another 20 minutes before emerging. We have to go, Natalie whispered. Now. Did you get everything you need? She asked as they crept downstairs. David held up the USB drive. Enough to start a war. They made it to the kitchen before the lights came on. Going somewhere? Trent was standing in the doorway, no longer wearing his tuxedo. Behind him were the two men from upstairs, both now holding pieces. I thought you might try something like this, Trent continued. Natalie's been acting strange lately, distant, guilty. And you, David, you've been playing detective when you should have been playing grieving ex-husband. Let Natalie go, David said. Your problem is with me. Actually, my problem is with both of you. But don't worry, this will be quick. The stranger with a piece stepped forward. Mr. Baylor, perhaps we should reconsider the timeline. 2 bodies tonight, 1 tomorrow. It might be too coincidental. You're right, Trent smiled, and David saw the monster underneath the polished exterior. We'll stick to the original plan. David dies tonight. Suicide in his own home, driven mad by the custody battle. Natalie dies tomorrow. Tragic accident, gas leak. She was so distraught over David's death that she wasn't being careful. And the child? Emily will go to her grandmother in Seattle. Terrible thing, losing both parents so close together. But children are resilient. David felt something snap inside his chest. These people were discussing Emily's future, like she was a piece of property to be disposed of. You're not touching my daughter. Actually, David, I don't think you'll be in a position to stop me. Trent nodded to the gunman, who raised his weapon. David grabbed a knife from the counter and threw himself forward. What followed was chaos, screaming, crashing, the sound of gunshots in the confined space of the kitchen. David felt the knife connect, heard someone cry out in pain. Glass shattered. A chair broke. When the noise stopped, David was on the floor. There were cuts on his forehead. Trent was against the far wall, clutching his shoulder where the knife had found its mark. One of the gunmen was unconscious. The other criminal had his apiece trained on Natalie. Enough, the stranger said calmly. This has become unnecessarily complicated. David tried to stand, but his legs weren't working properly. The blow to his head had left him dizzy, disoriented. New plan, the stranger continued. Jealous ex-husband breaks into house, stabs current husband, shoots wife, turns a piece on himself. Very dramatic. Very believable. Wait, Trent gasped, still clutching his shoulder. I need Natalie alive, at least until we can access her bank accounts, transfer assets. Mr. Baylor, you're thinking like a businessman instead of a survivor. Dead people can't testify. Dead people can't identify bodies. Dead people solve problems. The stranger turned to his conscious associate. Make it look convincing. But before the gunman could act, the kitchen exploded with light and sound. Federal agents, drop your weapons. FBI agents poured through every entrance, front door, back door, windows. The house erupted with shouts, tactical commands, the sound of boots on marble floors. David watched in amazement as the situation reversed itself in seconds. Trent and his associates were on the ground, hands zip-tied behind their backs. Natalie was being checked for injuries by an EMT. How? David asked the agent who was helping him to his feet. Your friend Luis, the agent replied. Turns out he's still got connections at the bureau. When he sent us the evidence you'd gathered, along with real-time audio from the wife's wire, we had enough for warrants on the entire operation. Natalie was wearing a wire? Hidden in her necklace. We've been recording everything for the past 2 hours. David looked at his ex-wife, who managed a weak smile despite everything they'd been through. You planned this, he said. We planned this, she corrected. Luis contacted me yesterday. The three of us worked out the details. Emily? Safe with Mrs. Patterson, surrounded by enough federal agents to protect the president. David felt his legs give out again, but this time from relief rather than injury. It was over. Finally, impossibly, it was over. 6 months later, David sat in a federal courthouse watching Trent Baylor receive a sentence that would keep him in prison for the rest of his life. The charges read like a horror novel: conspiracy, racketeering, human trafficking, multiple counts of felony termination. The trial had been a media sensation. GenDepth Lab's human experimentation program had horrified the public and triggered congressional hearings on biomedical research oversight. Trent's associates had testified against him in exchange for reduced sentences, but even their cooperation couldn't save him from the mountain of evidence. Emily sat beside David in the gallery, wearing a blue dress and her most serious expression. She'd testified earlier in the trial, not about what she'd seen in the basement, but about the fear she'd lived with, the way Trent had made her feel unsafe in her own home. The judge had been kind but thorough, and Emily had answered every question with the kind of honesty that only children possess. "Mr. Baylor," the judge said, "in 30 years on this bench, I have never encountered crimes of this magnitude. You have shown a complete disregard for human life, dignity, and the basic principles of civilized society." Trent stood ramrod straight, showing no emotion as his life was dismantled piece by piece. "The court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on the conspiracy charges, life imprisonment on the racketeering charges, and consecutive sentences totaling 150 years on the remaining counts." Trent finally showed emotion. A brief flicker of rage before his lawyer's hand on his arm reminded him where he was. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "the court orders the forfeiture of all assets connected to GenDepth Labs and its associated shell companies. These funds will be used to compensate the victims and their families." As Trent was led away in shackles, he looked directly at David. The hatred in his eyes was pure, distilled evil, but it was also powerless now. Outside the courthouse, the media scrum was intense but brief. David had learned to give short, factual statements and avoid the sensational questions that reporters love. "Mr. Thorne, how does it feel to see justice done?" "It feels like a beginning, not an end. There are still victims who need care, families who need closure, and systems that need reform." "What's next for you and Emily?" David looked down at his daughter, who was handling the attention with remarkable composure. "We're going home. We're going to have dinner and help with homework and read bedtime stories. Normal stuff." "Any plans to write a book? A movie deal?" "No, this isn't entertainment, it's tragedy. Real people died, and their families deserve respect, not spectacle." Later that evening, David and Emily sat on their front porch, watching the sunset and decompressing from the intensity of the trial. "Do you think Uncle Sean would be proud of us?" Emily asked. David considered the question carefully. Sean Morrison's body had been recovered from a shallow grave outside the city, the final piece of evidence that had sealed Trent's fate. "I think he'd be proud that we didn't let the bad guys win." "Do you think Mommy's okay?" Natalie had received immunity for her testimony, but the psychological trauma of everything she'd endured was taking time to heal. She was living in a small apartment across town, attending therapy, slowly rebuilding her life. "She's getting better every day, and she gets to see you whenever she wants now." "Will she ever be happy again?" "I think so. It might take time, but yes." Emily leaned against David's arm. "Daddy, were you scared during the trial?" "Sometimes, were you?" "A little, but I knew you wouldn't let anything bad happen to me." David felt the weight of that trust, that absolute faith his daughter had in him. It was humbling and terrifying and wonderful all at once. "Emily, there's something I want you to understand. What happened to us, the bad things Trent did, that's not normal. Most people are good. Most families are safe. I don't want you to grow up thinking the world is a dangerous place. But it is dangerous sometimes. Yes. But it's also beautiful and full of people who care about each other, like Mrs. Patterson, who watched over you, like Luis, who helped us get evidence, like Cynthia, who fought for us in court, like you and Mommy, who protected me even when it was scary." "Exactly." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching their neighbors come home from work, kids playing in yards, normal life, resuming its rhythm. Daddy, can I ask you something kind of weird? Always. Do you think bad people know they're bad? Or do they think they're good people doing good things? The question was so profound that David had to think for a moment before answering. I think most bad people convince themselves they're doing the right thing. They find ways to justify their actions, to make themselves feel better about the choices they make. Like Trent thinking his experiments would help people? Maybe. Or like him thinking that because he was smart and successful, he deserved to do whatever he wanted. That's stupid. Yes, it is. But the important thing is that we never stop asking ourselves if we're doing the right thing. We never stop caring about how our choices affect other people. Is that why you fought so hard to stop him? Because you cared about the people he was hurting? That's part of it. But mostly, I fought because I love you, and I couldn't let anything happen to you. Emily was quiet for a moment. Then, I love you too, Daddy, and I'm proud of you for being brave. I'm proud of you for being brave too. We make a good team. The best. Later that night, after Emily was asleep, David stood in his kitchen making coffee and thinking about the future. The house felt different now, safer, more peaceful. The security cameras were still there, but they felt less necessary with each passing day. His phone rang. Natalie's name appeared on the screen. "Hey," he said. "Hey, I wanted to call and thank you again for everything." "You don't need to thank me, Nat. We were protecting our daughter." "No, David. You were protecting your daughter. I was the one who put her in danger in the first place." "You made a mistake. You're human." "I made a lot of mistakes. I chose money over safety, status over family, fantasy over reality." David could hear the therapy speak in her words, but also genuine remorse. "What matters is that you found the courage to make it right." "I found the courage to help you make it right. There's a difference." They talked for a few more minutes about Emily's school, upcoming custody arrangements, and practical matters. But underneath the mundane conversation was a current of something David hadn't felt in years. Genuine communication between two people who cared about each other's well-being. "David, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you think we could ever—" "Not get back together, I don't mean that. But do you think we could be friends again? Real friends?" David looked out his kitchen window at the quiet street, thinking about forgiveness and second chances and the complicated nature of human relationships. "I'd like that, Nat. I think Emily would like that too." "Good. Because I miss talking to you. I miss having someone in my life who knew me before I became this person I don't recognize." "You're still the same person underneath. The person who used to stay up all night when Emily had colic. The person who cried at animated movies. The person who wanted to save the world by becoming a doctor. That person feels very far away sometimes. She's still there, and Emily needs to see her." After they hung up, David walked through his house one more time before bed. Emily's room, where she slept peacefully, surrounded by stuffed animals and books. The living room, where they did homework and watched movies. The kitchen, where they cooked meals together and talked about their days. It wasn't a mansion. It didn't have marble floors or crystal chandeliers. But it was home. It was safe. It was theirs. 6 months earlier, David had been a weekend father fighting for scraps of time with his daughter. Tonight, he was a full-time dad whose child felt secure enough to sleep without nightmares. The war was over. They had won. But more than that, they had survived. And sometimes, survival was its own form of victory. David turned off the lights and went to bed, already looking forward to tomorrow morning. Pancakes and homework help and all the beautiful, ordinary moments that made up a life worth fighting for. In her bedroom, Emily slept peacefully, dreaming of better days ahead. And, in a small apartment across town, Natalie sat at her kitchen table writing in a journal her therapist had suggested, slowly learning to forgive herself for the choices that had almost destroyed everything she loved. The story was ending, but their lives were just beginning again. David stood at the edge of Emily's soccer field, watching his 9-year-old daughter score the winning goal in the championship game. In the stands, Natalie cheered just as loudly, her face bright with genuine joy. They weren't a traditional family anymore, but they were a family nonetheless. Emily spent weekdays with David and weekends with Natalie, who had slowly rebuilt her life as a pediatric consultant at the local hospital. The arrangement worked because all three of them had learned what really mattered. After the game, they went for ice cream, a tradition that had emerged naturally over the past year. Emily chattered excitedly about the goal, the season, her plans for summer camp. Daddy, remember when I was little and I was scared all the time? You were never scared, Em. You were the bravest person I knew. But I was scared inside, and now I'm not. What changed? Emily considered the question seriously. I think I figured out that being safe isn't about living in a big house or having lots of money. It's about being with people who love you more than anything else in the world. David and Natalie exchanged glances across the table, the kind of look that parents share when their child says something that cuts right to the heart of everything important. That's exactly right, Natalie said. And you know what? You taught us that. I did? You did. You showed us what really matters. You showed us how to be brave. Emily grinned, ice cream on her chin, completely unaware that she had just summarized the most important lesson any of them had learned.